Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and let our minds drift back to a time when the bedrock of American industry was literally pulled from the ground by human hands, in conditions that would make your jaw drop. We're talking about the brutal life of a coal miner in the Industrial Revolution. Forget your heated homes and electric lights. For these brave, desperate souls, every day was a grim descent into darkness, a battle against nature, and a relentless fight for survival. It's a journey through unbelievable hardship, but one that's crucial to understanding the foundations of modern America. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in for tonight's journey, feel free to drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Whether that's a quiet evening in a suburban home in West Virginia or a late night in a bustling apartment in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself now, standing on the edge of a small, grimy town nestled in the Appalachian Mountains in the late 1800s. The air here doesn't smell of fresh pine and crisp mountain breezes. It carries the acrid tang of coal smoke and the faint, unsettling scent of sulfur. This is a coal town, perhaps somewhere like Matewan, West Virginia, or Centralia, Pennsylvania, and for you, like so many others, your life is inextricably tied to the black veins running deep beneath the earth. Your journey into the mine, your descent into darkness, is not a choice made lightly. It's a desperate necessity, driven by poverty and the relentless demand for coal to fuel America's booming industrial revolution. The coal seam beckons, not with a siren song, but with the grim promise of meager wages that might just keep your family from starving. The first thing you notice as you approach the mine entrance, often called the pit mouth or drift mouth in these Appalachian hollers, is the sheer, overwhelming darkness within. It's not the soft, comforting darkness of a quiet night. It's an impenetrable, suffocating blackness that swallows the weak light of the morning sun. You might hear the rumble of coal cars, the distant shouts of men, and a chilling sense of dampness that permeates everything. This is your new reality, a subterranean world where natural light is a forgotten luxury. It's like stepping into a vast, unlit cavern every single day, knowing that every breath you take is filled with the dust of the very earth you're carving out. Your initial steps into the mine are tentative. The air immediately grows heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth, stagnant water, and the omnipresent, gritty scent of coal dust. The passage, carved out of rock and coal, is often low and narrow, forcing you to stoop, perhaps even crawl, as you make your way deeper. Timber supports, rough-hewn and barely adequate, crisscross above your head, groaning under the immense weight of the mountain. You might brush against the rough, cold coal face, feeling the sharp edges of the seam that holds your future. As you move further, the sounds of the surface world fade, replaced by a symphony of subterranean echoes, the drip of water from the ceiling, the distant clang of metal on rock, the labored breathing of your fellow miners. The temperature often drops, replaced by a clammy chill that sinks into your bones. Your only source of light is typically a small, flickering flame from a simple oil lamp, perhaps worn on your cap, or a carbide lamp that sputters and hisses, casting dancing shadows that seem to distort the very air around you. This dim illumination only highlights the immediate surroundings, leaving the vastness of the tunnel in terrifying blackness. It's like trying to navigate a sprawling, underground city with nothing but a single match, knowing that any wrong turn could lead to oblivion. A common historical truth is that early coal mines were characterized by profound and pervasive darkness. necessitating rudimentary personal lamps as the sole light source, and forcing miners to work in cramped, often stooped conditions deep underground. This constant physical strain and sensory deprivation were fundamental aspects of their daily existence. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological toll of this continuous darkness and isolation on the miners, and how much it contributed to the development of unique cultural or social bonds within mining communities as a coping mechanism. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about this descent into darkness is the practice of fire bosses or mine foremen conducting pre-shift inspections using open flames, often small candles, to detect dangerous methane gas. Despite the inherent risk of explosion, imagine being a fire boss, your life depending on the flicker of a flame. These brave, or perhaps desperate, individuals would enter the mine before the main shift, sometimes crawling into low, unventilated areas, holding a lamp aloft. If the flame suddenly elongated and burned with a blue cap, it signaled the presence of methane, often called firedamp. This was a warning, a desperate call to evacuate or ventilate the area before a spark from another miner's lamp, or the clang of a pickaxe on rock, could ignite the invisible explosive gas. This practice, while dangerous, was a crucial part of mine safety at the time. But it meant that the very act of checking for danger was inherently perilous. It's like checking for a gas leak in your house by lighting a match, hoping you find it before the explosion. No thanks. As you finally reach your assigned section, or working face, the true grim setting of your labor reveals itself. You might be in a narrow room or heading, barely wider than your shoulders, with the coal seam stretching before you. The ceiling might be low, forcing you to work on your knees, or even lying on your side, hacking at the coal above or beside you. The air here is even heavier, the dust more pervasive, clinging to your skin, hair, and lungs. The sheer physical claustrophobia can be overwhelming, a constant pressure from the earth above and around you. The noise, once you begin working, becomes deafening. The rhythmic thud of pickaxes striking coal, the scrape of shovels, the clatter of falling rock, and the distant rumble of coal cars fill the confined space. Communication becomes difficult, often reduced to shouts or hand signals. The sense of isolation, even amidst your fellow miners, can be profound. Each man is locked in his own struggle against the unforgiving rock, the only solace being the shared misery and silent understanding of the men beside him. The journey to the working face itself could be arduous. Sometimes, you'd walk miles underground, stooping and stumbling through uneven tunnels, carrying your tools and your meager lunch pail. Other times, you might ride in open, unlit coal cars, clinging precariously as they rattled through the darkness, the faint sounds of the wheels on the tracks echoing ominously in the blackness. This daily commute, before any actual work even began, was enough to exhaust a modern person. Yet, for the miners, it was just the beginning of another grueling shift. This descent into darkness and the grim setting of the coal mine were not just physical challenges. They were profound psychological trials. The constant threat of collapse, explosion, or gas, the pervasive darkness, the choking dust all combined to create an environment of perpetual anxiety. Yet, for these men, and often boys, this was simply the job. It was the price they paid to put food on the table, to send their children to school, to perhaps dream of a slightly better future. The coal seam beckoned, and they answered its call, day after brutal day, carving out not just fuel for a nation, but a living from the very heart of the earth. So, as the turbulent shadows of the industrial past gently recede, and the distant echoes of pickaxes and rumbling coal cars softly fade into the quiet hum of your room, let your thoughts settle. Allow the intricate details of descent into darkness, where the coal seam beckoned and its grim setting defined every breath, to drift softly from your mind. There's no rush, nowhere to be but here in this peaceful moment. The grim realities of a time when men braved suffocating blackness and explosive gases with flickering lamps remind us of a raw, untamed past. Its story is a profound tapestry of human desperation and the chilling demands of a nascent industry, a distant echo of a time when survival meant plunging into the earth's unforgiving embrace, and where the line between life and oblivion was often blurred. Just relax, and let sleep softly claim you, knowing that the turbulent waters of the past have calmed, leaving you in the comforting quiet of the present, where the only adventure you need now is the one waiting for you in your dreams. Let's gently return to that subterranean world, where your daily descent into darkness was greeted by the suffocating chill and the grim, coal-dusted reality of the seam beckoning. If we've just explored the daunting environment of the mine itself, tonight we'll delve into the sheer, back-breaking labor that defined a miner's life tools of torment, pickaxe, shovel, and endless toil. You might imagine precision machinery, but for your ancient ancestor, a coal miner in the Industrial Revolution, their existence was a relentless manual battle against the earth, armed with nothing but rudimentary hand tools and an indomitable, if weary, spirit. Imagine yourself, now, deep within that narrow, damp coal seam, perhaps in a mine shaft stretching beneath the rolling hills of southwestern Pennsylvania or along the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee. Your body aches even before the shift truly begins, a constant companion to the damp cold that permeates your clothes. Your muscles are still weary from yesterday's endless toil, and the thought of the hours stretching before you, marked only by the flickering flame of your lamp, is a heavy burden. Your primary companions in this brutal work are simple, yet unforgiving: the pickaxe and the shovel, the very tools of torment that define your existence. It's like trying to carve a giant statue out of solid rock, armed with nothing but a butter knife, and knowing you have to finish it by sundown every single day. The pickaxe is an extension of your arm, its heavy steel head dull from countless impacts, its wooden handle worn smooth by your calloused hands. This isn't a delicate instrument. It's a brute force weapon against the stubborn earth. You grip it, swing it, and bring it down with all your might against the coal face, the jarring impact reverberating through your arms, shoulders, and spine. Each swing is a calculated effort aiming for the natural cracks and fissures in the coal, trying to dislodge chunks large enough to be worthwhile, but not so large that they become unmanageable or cause a dangerous collapse. The sound of steel against coal is a constant, rhythmic thunk, 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 a monotonous beat that becomes the soundtrack to your day, punctuated by the occasional crack as a larger piece of coal breaks free. This isn't just about raw strength. It's about technique. You learn to read the coal, to understand its grain, its weaknesses. You learn where to strike to get the most yield with the least effort, conserving your precious energy. But even with skill, the work is brutally exhausting. Hour after hour, you wield that pickaxe, your muscles screaming in protest, sweat stinging your eyes, your lungs burning from the dust-laden air. The posture itself is often unnatural, hunched over, kneeling, or lying on your side in low seams, twisting your body to gain leverage. Imagine spending 8, 10, or even 12 hours a day in a contorted position, swinging a heavy tool in near-total darkness. It's a miracle anyone could sustain it. A common historical truth is that coal mining during the Industrial Revolution was overwhelmingly manual labor, relying heavily on simple hand tools like the pickaxe and shovel, which subjected miners to extreme physical exertion and musculoskeletal strain in cramped, dark conditions. This contrasts sharply with modern mechanized mining operations. Historians still widely debate the precise ergonomic impact of specific mining techniques on the long-term physical health of miners beyond obvious injuries, and how much the design of these rudimentary tools inadvertently contributed to unique patterns of chronic pain and disability. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about these tools of torment and the endless toil is the miner's reliance on blasting powder, or black powder, to break up harder sections of coal. A dangerous procedure that often led to injuries, explosions, and filled the mine with noxious fumes, adding another layer of terror to their daily routine. While the pickaxe was the primary tool, when the coal seam became too hard or thick to manage manually, miners would bore holes into the coal face using hand drills, then carefully pack these holes with blasting powder. After setting a fuse, they would retreat to a safe distance, waiting for the muffled boom that shook the earth. This wasn't a job for specialists. It was often part of the general miner's duties. Imagine placing explosives into a confined space, lighting a fuse, and hoping you've judged the distance and the charge correctly, knowing that a miscalculation could mean a cave-in, an uncontained explosion, or being caught by flying debris. And then, after the blast, you'd return to the area, often still filled with suffocating smoke and dangerous gases, to begin the manual work of shoveling the newly loosened coal. It's like playing Russian roulette with dynamite, and then having to clean up the aftermath in a smoky, confined space. Once the coal was loosened by the pickaxe or the blast, the shovel became your next companion. You would scoop the heavy, jagged chunks of coal into small carts, known as mine cars or coal trams, which would then be pulled by mules, ponies, or even by children to the main shaft or slope. This shoveling was just as demanding as the picking. Coal is heavy, dirty, and abrasive. You would fill dozens, perhaps hundreds, of these carts in a single shift, each one representing a piece of your strength, your sweat, your life. The rhythmic scrape-clatter-thud of coal being loaded into carts would join the thunk of the pickaxe, creating the continuous symphony of the mine. The endless toil was compounded by the incentive system. Miners were often paid by the ton of coal they extracted, rather than by the hour. This meant there was immense pressure to work faster, harder, and longer, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit, risking injury and exhaustion for every extra lump of coal. The more coal you got out, the more money you earned. And money meant food on the table for your family. This system, while seemingly motivating, incentivized dangerous practices and relentless overexertion. Furthermore, the tools themselves were often supplied by the company, and any repairs or replacements were sometimes deducted from the miner's meager wages. So, maintaining your pickaxe and shovel was not just about efficiency, it was about protecting your livelihood. A broken tool meant lost time, lost wages, and another deduction from your already slim pay envelope. The physical consequences of this endless toil were inevitable. Miners developed chronic back pain, strained shoulders, bruised hands, and joints stiffened by repetitive stress and damp conditions. The constant strain on their bodies meant that few miners reached old age without being crippled or severely debilitated. Their bodies became living maps of their labor, marked by scars, deformities, and the slow, insidious decay caused by years of brutal physical exertion in an unforgiving environment. So, while the image of a miner might evoke strength, the reality was a life defined by tools of torment, where the pickaxe and shovel were wielded in endless toil, extracting not just coal, but the very essence of their physical being. This era reminds us of the raw, grinding labor that built the foundations of the Industrial Revolution, proving that for millennia, Human ingenuity often rested on the back-breaking efforts of those who battled the earth with their bare hands and simple steel, carving out a livelihood from the very heart of darkness. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of tools of torment. Your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, would have wielded a heavy pickaxe and shovel in endless toil, chipping away at the earth, perhaps even using dangerous blasting powder, just to survive another day. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish modern technology and comfortable working conditions, for centuries, countless lives were defined by brutal manual labor, constant physical pain, and the ever-present threat of injury, leaving us truly grateful for the safety regulations and mechanized processes that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mines, let's gently return to that relentless underground world, where your body was a constant companion to the heavy pickaxe and shovel, engaged in endless toil to extract coal from the grim setting of the mine. If we've just explored the sheer physical brutality of a miner's daily labor, tonight we'll delve into the insidious, invisible enemy that constantly lurked in the very air. They breathed breath of black, dust, danger, and diseased lungs. You might think of fresh, clean air as a given, but for your ancient ancestor, every breath taken deep within that coal mine was a slow, agonizing compromise, filling their lungs with a silent killer that would eventually claim their lives. Imagine yourself, now, working deep within a coal seam, perhaps in a mine stretching beneath the coal fields of Kentucky, or the vast, dark tunnels of southern Illinois in the late 1800s. The air here isn't just damp and cold, it's thick, opaque, with microscopic particles. This is the breath of black, the pulverized coal dust that hangs heavy in the air, stirred up by every swing of your pickaxe, a callback to Chapter 2, every shovelful of coal, every passing cart, and even every word spoken. It coats your skin, blackens your clothes, and, most terrifyingly, fills your lungs with every labored inhale. It's like trying to breathe inside a fine sandstorm that never ends. Only the sand is made of razor-sharp, insidious particles, and you have to do it for 12 hours a day. This coal dust was not just an inconvenience. It was an ever-present danger, an invisible enemy that slowly, relentlessly destroyed a miner's most vital organ. With each passing hour, each shift, each year, these tiny, sharp particles would accumulate in your lungs, scarring the delicate tissues, turning them progressively black, and suffocating the very capacity to breathe. This was the grim reality of black lung, or pneumoconiosis, a disease that silently stalked every miner, regardless of their strength or skill. You might not feel it immediately. Beyond the irritation in your throat and the constant need to cough up black phlegm, but over years, the insidious damage would manifest. Your breathing would become shallower, more labored. A persistent cough would rack your body, especially in the cold morning air. Climbing the slightest incline would leave you gasping for air, your chest burning. Eventually, even resting, your diseased lungs would struggle to draw a full breath, as if you were constantly suffocating, slowly, from the inside out. It's a cruel irony that the very substance that fueled the nation's progress was simultaneously suffocating the men who extracted it. A common historical truth is that coal miners during the Industrial Revolution suffered extensively from severe respiratory diseases, primarily pneumoconiosis, or black lung, caused by prolonged inhalation of coal dust in poorly ventilated mines, leading to chronic debilitation and premature death. This occupational hazard was a widespread and largely unaddressed health crisis of the era. Historians still widely debate the precise mortality rates attributable solely to black lung versus other mining-related illnesses or accidents, and how much early medical practitioners understood the direct link between coal dust exposure and respiratory failure, or if it was simply accepted as an unavoidable consequence of the profession. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about this breath of black and its danger to the lungs is the widespread use of spittoons, or direct spitting onto the mine floor, where the accumulated black phlegm and saliva, mixed with coal dust, created a potent breeding ground for other infectious respiratory diseases like tuberculosis, exacerbating an already dire health crisis. While coal dust directly caused black lung, the damp, unsanitary conditions, combined with miners constantly coughing up and spitting out lung-damaging particulate matter and other bodily fluids, turned the mine environment into a petri dish. Tuberculosis, often called consumption, was rampant in mining communities, easily spreading through the airborne droplets of a cough or spit. Imagine working shoulder to shoulder with men constantly spitting black phlegm, knowing that each one could be unknowingly spreading a deadly, contagious disease through the very air you're struggling to breathe. It's like living in a constant state of biological warfare, where the enemy is invisible and your own breath becomes a weapon. Beyond black lung, the constant dampness and chilling temperatures of the mine, combined with physically exhausting work, made miners highly susceptible to other respiratory infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, and the ever-present threat of influenza swept through mining camps with devastating regularity. A simple cold could quickly escalate into a life-threatening illness for lungs already compromised by dust and disease. The lack of ventilation systems in early mines only compounded the problem. Air circulation was often minimal, allowing the dust to hang suspended for hours, creating a perpetual haze. It wasn't until later in the Industrial Revolution, driven by some early labor movements, a hint of Chapter 8, that rudimentary mechanical ventilation systems began to be introduced, though often insufficient to fully mitigate the airborne threats. For decades, miners simply breathed what was there, with no protective equipment beyond a handkerchief tied loosely around their faces. If they were lucky, the impact of diseased lungs extended far beyond the individual miner. Families lived in constant fear, watching their fathers, husbands, and sons slowly wither away. The financial burden of long-term illness meant less income, more debt, and often an even more desperate cycle of poverty for mining families. A miner too sick to work was a man whose family might starve, leading many to push their failing bodies back into the mine, knowing it was a death sentence. But the only option, this was the silent, agonizing toll of the miner's consumption, a slow death that offered no dignity or escape. The legacy of the breath of black is long and dark. For generations, the coal that powered homes and factories across America was paid for not just with money, but with the very breath of the men who extracted it. Their lungs, once strong, became monuments to their sacrifice, silent testaments to the price of progress. So, while we enjoy the warmth and electricity powered by coal, it's vital to remember the grim reality of the breath of black. The pervasive dust created an invisible danger, leading to devastatingly diseased lungs and a slow, agonizing death for countless miners. This era reminds us of the profound human cost of industrialization, proving that, for millennia, the pursuit of progress often extracted an invisible, yet deadly, tribute from the very bodies of those who labored in its depths. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of the breath of black. Your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, would have inhaled dangerous dust, facing the constant threat of diseased lungs like black lung and tuberculosis, slowly suffocating in the very air they breathed. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish modern health and safety standards, for centuries, countless lives were defined by insidious environmental hazards, chronic illness, and a grim, inescapable decline, leaving us truly grateful for the protective measures and medical advancements that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mines, let's gently return to that subterranean world where the breath of black filled every corner, and the insidious dust slowly, silently created diseased lungs, turning every inhale into a profound danger. If we've just explored the agonizing, slow death caused by invisible particles, tonight we'll delve into the sudden, terrifying cataclysms that could extinguish a miner's life in an instant. Invisible killers, methane, explosions, and sudden death. You might think of mining as inherently risky, but for your ancient ancestor, working in these depths meant living on the razor's edge, where a single spark could ignite a hellish inferno, turning their workplace into a tomb. Imagine yourself, now, deep within a coal mine in the American heartland, perhaps in the vast network of tunnels beneath a town like Scranton, Pennsylvania, or Helper, Utah, sometime in the late 19th or early 20th century. The air is still, heavy, and the only sounds are the rhythmic thunk of your pickaxe, a callback to Chapter 2, and the low murmur of your fellow miners. But there's an unseen presence here, a silent, odorless threat that permeates every crevice and pocket of the mine: methane. This highly flammable gas, often called firedamp by the miners, is naturally released from coal seams as they are worked. It's lighter than air, so it tends to collect in the highest parts of the mine, in unventilated headings, or in abandoned workings. It's like being in a tightly sealed room that's slowly, invisibly filling with highly explosive gas, and your only warning is a slight change in the air pressure you can barely detect. For decades, miners had no reliable way to detect this invisible killer. They relied on the simple flame of their oil lamps or carbide lamps, a callback to Chapter 1. If the flame lengthened and showed a cap of blue around it, it was a terrifying sign that methane was present. This rudimentary method, however, was itself incredibly dangerous. An open flame, a spark from a pickaxe striking rock, even the friction of a poorly maintained piece of machinery could instantly ignite the gas, leading to a catastrophic explosion. The consequences of a methane explosion were almost unimaginably horrific. The initial blast would send a concussive wave through the narrow tunnels, instantly killing or severely injuring anyone in its direct path, often by crushing them against the walls or ceiling. This primary explosion would then kick up vast clouds of coal dust, that same insidious dust from Chapter 3, which, when mixed with oxygen, would then ignite in a secondary, even more powerful blast. This was often called a dust explosion, and it was even more devastating, tearing through miles of tunnels, incinerating everything in its path. Imagine being caught in a confined space where the air itself suddenly erupts into a fiery hurricane, obliterating everything and everyone around you. A common historical truth is that methane gas and coal dust explosions were the leading causes of mass fatalities in coal mines during the Industrial Revolution, leading to instantaneous and widespread death, and highlighting the severe and inherent dangers of subterranean work before modern safety protocols. This stark reality drove many early labor safety reforms. Historians still widely debate the precise impact of early rudimentary ventilation systems on mitigating explosion risks, and whether their initial implementation was more about improving air quality for comfort than truly addressing the fundamental dangers of explosive gases and dust. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about these invisible killers and the threat of sudden death is the deadly follow-up to an explosion after damp. a suffocating mixture of carbon monoxide and other toxic gases produced by the blast, which would silently claim the lives of those who survived the initial inferno but couldn't escape quickly enough. While the explosion itself was terrifying, perhaps even more insidious was the aftermath. Miners who might have been knocked unconscious, trapped by debris, or simply too far from the entrance to escape would then succumb to the invisible, odorless, and tasteless afterdamp. Carbon monoxide binds irreversibly to hemoglobin in the blood, preventing oxygen transport, leading to disorientation, weakness, and eventually a silent, painless death. Imagine surviving the initial explosion, perhaps with broken bones and burns, only to slowly lose consciousness, your lamp flickering out as your body is starved of oxygen, surrounded by the silence of the dead. It's like surviving a terrible car crash only to find your car's exhaust pipe is now pumping poison directly into the cabin. The fear of these explosions was a constant, gnawing presence in every miner's life. Every shift was a gamble. You might kiss your family goodbye in the morning, never knowing if a pocket of methane, an ill-placed spark, or a sudden buildup of dust would mean you wouldn't return. The unpredictability of these disasters added an unbearable psychological toll to the physical hardship. It instilled a grim fatalism in many mining communities, where death in the mine was not an if, but a when. Rescue efforts after an explosion were often heroic but tragically futile. Fellow miners, sometimes without proper equipment, would rush into the burning, gas-filled tunnels, risking their own lives to find survivors. But the afterdamp would claim many more, turning rescue into recovery, pulling out bodies rather than living men. The scenes above ground, as families gathered, desperate for news, were agonizing. Wives and children would wait for days, hoping against hope for a sign of life, only to face the crushing reality that their loved ones had been consumed by the invisible killers below. The widespread nature of these disasters led to the coining of terms like mining disaster or mine catastrophe, a grim category of industrial accident unique in its scale of human loss. Towns would be decimated, leaving behind scores of widows and orphans, marking generations with the scars of sudden death from the depths of the earth. So, while we often focus on the physical labor of mining, it's crucial to remember the terrifying reality of invisible killers. Methane and coal dust created explosions that led to widespread sudden death, often followed by the insidious afterdamp. This era reminds us of the profound and instantaneous human cost of industrialization, proving that for millennia, the pursuit of energy often came at the price of countless lives, extinguished in a terrifying flash, with little warning, deep within the unforgiving earth. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of invisible killers. Your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, would have faced the constant threat of methane and coal dust explosions, which often led to sudden death from the blast or the insidious afterdamp, silently stealing their last breath. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish modern safety regulations and technology, for centuries, countless lives were defined by the unpredictable, instantaneous horror of subterranean disaster, leaving us truly grateful for the extensive preventative measures and rescue protocols that define our lives today, far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mines. Let's gently return to that treacherous underground world, where invisible killers like methane and coal dust triggered catastrophic explosions, bringing sudden death and the suffocating embrace of afterdamp. If we've just confronted the instantaneous horrors that could claim a miner's life, tonight we'll illuminate an even more heartbreaking aspect of this brutal era: childhood's end, young lives, dark tunnels, and stunted futures. You might imagine childhood as a time of innocence and play. But for your ancient ancestor in the Industrial Revolution, for countless children, it meant being thrust into the unforgiving depths of the mine, where the very light of their youth was extinguished and their futures irrevocably marred. Imagine yourself, now, not as an adult miner, but as a child, perhaps no older than 8 or 9, standing at the pit mouth of a coal mine in a small Appalachian community, or a bustling mining town in northern Pennsylvania, circa the mid-19th century. Your clothes are patched and worn, your face smudged even before you begin, and a crushing weight of responsibility already rests on your tiny shoulders. This isn't a game. This is your job. This is the tragic reality of childhood's end, where the grim economic demands of the Industrial Revolution devoured young lives, forcing them into the dark tunnels of the mine, virtually guaranteeing stunted futures. It's like being forced to grow up overnight, not just by circumstance, but by the very earth itself, which demands your labor before you've even learned to fully live. Children were a cheap and abundant labor source, particularly appealing to mine owners looking to maximize profits. Their small stature made them ideal for navigating the narrow, cramped spaces that even adults struggled with. They could crawl into low seams, push through tight passageways, and perform tasks that larger bodies couldn't. This wasn't a hidden secret. It was a widely accepted, albeit grim, reality of the time. Many families, desperate to avoid starvation, relied on every able-bodied and often not so able-bodied member to contribute to the household income. It's almost unbelievable, like seeing a kindergarten class being sent to work in a dangerous construction zone every day. One of the most common roles for children, especially the youngest, was that of a breaker boy. Imagine yourself sitting in a dusty, noisy coal breaker shed on the surface, just outside the mine entrance. Your job is to pick out impurities like slate, rock, and other debris from the endless stream of coal as it passed down chutes. The work was monotonous, incredibly dirty, and dangerous. The air was thick with coal dust, a constant enemy, as we explored in Breath of Black, in Chapter 3, coating everything and slowly, insidiously damaging their developing lungs. Their fingers, nimble but unprotected, were constantly at risk of being crushed or severed by the fast-moving coal and machinery. Hours upon hours, they sat hunched over, their faces grim, their small hands working tirelessly, day in and day out. A common historical truth is that child labor was rampant in coal mines during the Industrial Revolution, with children as young as 6 or 8 performing dangerous tasks like breaker boy or trapper, exposing them to severe health risks, injury, and depriving them of education and a normal childhood. This exploitation was driven by economic desperation and a lack of protective labor laws. Historians still widely debate the precise long-term psychological impact of these early childhood experiences on the development and mental well-being of adult miners, and whether the shared trauma created unique bonds or exacerbated societal issues within mining communities. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about these young lives and their stunted futures in the mines is the crucial, yet often invisible, role of trapper boys, often the youngest, who sat alone in absolute darkness for 10 to 12 hours a day, responsible for opening and closing ventilation doors as coal cars passed, facing profound isolation and boredom, often with dire consequences if they fell asleep. Imagine being a child, sitting for an entire workday in complete silence and pitch blackness in a tiny chamber within the mine, with only your flickering lamp for company. If you were allowed one, your sole job was to pull a rope to open a wooden door when you heard the approach of coal cars or mules, allowing air to circulate or coal to pass, and then closing it immediately. If you failed to keep the door shut, ventilation patterns could be disrupted, allowing dangerous gases like methane to accumulate, a callback to invisible killers in Chapter 4, putting hundreds of lives at risk. The isolation was immense, the boredom soul-crushing, and the consequences of falling asleep potentially catastrophic. It's like being a tiny, essential cog in a massive, dangerous machine. But you're stuck in a dark corner, completely alone, with the fate of everyone else resting on your childlike vigilance. Beyond breaker boys and trapper boys, children worked in other hazardous roles too. They hauled heavy loads of coal, often pulling carts through low tunnels like human beasts of burden. They assisted adult miners, holding lamps, fetching tools, or crawling into tight spaces to set explosives. They might be door holders, like trapper boys, but closer to the working face, responsible for ensuring proper airflow. The inherent dangers of the mine, collapsing roofs, runaway coal cars, explosions, and gas were amplified for these small, vulnerable bodies. An adult might survive a cave-in. A child often had little chance. The physical toll on these young lives was immense. Their bodies, still developing, were subjected to incredible strain, leading to stunted growth, skeletal deformities, and chronic pain that would follow them into adulthood. The perpetual dark tunnels and lack of sunlight contributed to rickets and other vitamin deficiencies. And, of course, the constant inhalation of coal dust meant that many of these children, if they survived the immediate dangers, were destined to suffer from diseased lungs, a stark reminder from Chapter 3 and other respiratory ailments before they even reached middle age. Their futures were profoundly stunted. The vast majority of child miners received little to no formal education. Their days were spent in the mine, not in a schoolhouse. This lack of education trapped them in a generational cycle of poverty, destined to follow their fathers and grandfathers into the mines, with no escape. Their childhood, if it could even be called that, was stolen, replaced by grueling labor and the constant threat of injury or death. The conscience of society was slow to react to this egregious exploitation. It took decades of reform movements, powerful investigative journalism like the photography of Lewis Hine, and determined labor advocacy, a preview of Chapter 8 it promotes, to finally push for legislation that would curb, and eventually outlaw, child labor in the mines. But for generations of children, their childhood was already lost, buried beneath tons of coal, their laughter replaced by the echoes of picks and shovels in the dark tunnels. So, while we often marvel at the industrial might of the past, it's vital to remember the tragic reality of childhood's end. Young lives were sacrificed in dark tunnels, leading to stunted futures and a legacy of suffering. This era reminds us of the profound human cost of progress, proving that, for millennia, the engines of industry were often fueled by the stolen innocence and brutalized bodies of children, leaving an indelible stain on the annals of history. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of childhood's end. Your ancient ancestor, if born into a mining family, might have seen young lives, barely more than toddlers, sent into dark tunnels, their futures stunted by endless labor as breaker boys or trapper boys, enduring profound isolation and danger. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish childhood and education today, for centuries, countless children were robbed of their innocence and health, destined for a grim existence, leaving us truly grateful for the child labor laws and educational opportunities that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mines, let's gently return to that heart-wrenching reality of childhood's end, where young lives withered in dark tunnels, and stunted futures were the grim inheritance of countless children forced into the mines. if we've just confronted the profound human cost paid by the most vulnerable. Tonight we'll ascend from the suffocating depths of the mine to examine the equally oppressive world above ground surface struggles: poverty, company towns, and debt's grip. You might imagine a bustling free market, but for your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, their life was often entirely controlled by the very entity that paid their meager wages, trapping them in a relentless cycle of financial hardship and psychological dependence. Imagine yourself, now, stepping out of the mine at the end of a grueling, dust-choked shift, a stark reminder of Breath of Black from Chapter 3. Perhaps in a remote mining camp in southern Ohio or nestled in the valleys of West Virginia, sometime in the late 19th or early 20th century. Your body aches, your lungs burn, and the sunlight, even if weak, feels blinding after hours in the perpetual gloom. But your surface struggles are far from over. The mine company, which controls your work, often controls your entire life, trapping you and your family in a web of poverty and insidious economic control within the confines of the company town. It's like living in a remote village where the only employer also owns every house, every store, and even the local church, giving them absolute power over your existence. The company town was a pervasive feature of the Industrial Revolution's coal industry, particularly in isolated regions. Built by the mining companies themselves, these towns provided housing, a company store, often the only store, a company doctor, and sometimes even a company school or church. On the surface, it might sound convenient, even benevolent. In reality, it was a finely tuned system designed to maximize the company's control and minimize the miners' independence, ensuring that any meager wages earned quickly flowed back into the company's coffers. Your house, a small, often flimsy dwelling, was rented from the company. Its condition was rarely good, crowded, poorly insulated, and lacking proper sanitation. But you couldn't complain much. It was the only option. Your livelihood depended on it. It fostered a sense of constant precarity, knowing that if you lost your job, you also lost your home, with nowhere else to go. Imagine being able to be evicted at a moment's notice, simply for speaking out or trying to organize a foreshadowing of Chapter 8. A common historical truth is that coal miners in the Industrial Revolution often lived in company towns where the mining company owned virtually all essential services, including housing and stores, creating a system of economic dependency that trapped miners in cycles of debt and limited their independence. This was a prevalent model in remote mining regions across the United States. Historians still widely debate the precise extent to which company towns were designed primarily for social control versus simply addressing the logistical challenges of housing a transient labor force in undeveloped areas, and how much paternalistic benefits, such as company-built schools or hospitals, genuinely improved miners' quality of life versus being tools of further control. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about debt's grip in these company towns is the pervasive use of scrip, or company script, as a form of payment. Non-negotiable currency that could only be spent at the overpriced company store, effectively ensuring wages immediately returned to the company and preventing miners from accumulating savings or seeking better opportunities elsewhere. Imagine working 10 brutal hours a day, risking your life, remember invisible killers from Chapter 4, only to be paid not in actual U.S. dollars, but in fancy paper or metal tokens that are useless anywhere but the one store controlled by your employer. This store, predictably, charged inflated prices for basic necessities, food, clothing, tools, those very tools of torment from Chapter 2, even the coal you needed to heat your own home. Miners were often paid infrequently, perhaps once or twice a month, but were forced to buy on credit from the company store between paydays, racking up continuous debt. It's like being given monopoly money that only works at the monopoly bank, which also happens to own your house and your job. You're constantly playing a rigged game where you can never truly win. This system of scrip and company stores ensured that miners were almost always in debt to the company. They would often owe more than they earned, even before they received their next pay. This perpetual debt scrip was a powerful mechanism of control. A miner couldn't leave for another job without first settling their debt, which was often impossible. They were essentially bonded laborers, tied to the company town and the mine by an invisible, unbreakable chain of financial obligation. Imagine trying to leave a job you hate, but you owe your employer so much money for rent and groceries that you literally cannot afford to leave, trapping you and your family indefinitely. Poverty was not just a condition, it was a way of life, perpetuated by this system. Despite the back-breaking, dangerous work, miners rarely earned enough to escape their circumstances. Wages were low, and deductions for rent, medical care, tools, and store credit often left them with little to nothing. The entire family, including children, a somber reminder of childhood's end from Chapter 5, was often forced to work to collectively scrape by, ensuring the cycle continued. The company also controlled aspects of social life. Company police, often deputized by the state, maintained order, quickly quashing any dissent or attempts at labor organization. They were an omnipresent force, ensuring loyalty to the company, making it incredibly difficult for miners to speak up or challenge their exploitation. Imagine living in a town where the police force works directly for your employer, and their primary job is to make sure you don't complain about your wages. The cumulative effect of these surface struggles was a profound sense of hopelessness for many miners. Their lives, both inside and outside the mine, were dictated by the company. Their futures and their children's futures seemed inextricably tied to the black coal and the iron fist of the company boss. The promise of the Industrial Revolution for these families was not one of upward mobility, but of relentless struggle and perpetual debt's grip. So, while the dangers of the mine itself were stark, the surface struggles of poverty and the pervasive control of company towns, cemented by debt's grip, created an equally brutal reality for coal miners and their families. This era reminds us of the profound economic and social subjugation that often accompanied industrial progress, proving that for millennia, the pursuit of profit often came at the cost of human freedom and dignity, binding generations to a life of ceaseless toil and financial servitude, even when above ground. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of surface struggles. Your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, would have been trapped in pervasive poverty within company towns, where every aspect of their life, from housing to groceries, was controlled by the mine owner, and debt's grip, enforced by company scrip, ensured they could never escape. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish economic freedom and fair labor practices today, for centuries, countless lives were defined by insidious corporate control, perpetual financial hardship, and limited personal autonomy, leaving us truly grateful for the labor protections and diverse economic opportunities that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mines, let's gently return to that world of surface struggles, where poverty was a constant companion in company towns, and debt's grip held families captive, even after emerging from the dark tunnels. If we've just explored the economic and social confines of the miner's existence, tonight we'll illuminate an often overlooked, yet profoundly vital aspect of these communities' women of the mine: hard labor, hidden roles, and home's hearth. You might think of mining as a purely male domain, But for your ancient ancestor, the lives of women in these coal towns were defined by their own relentless toil, resilience, and their essential, often invisible contributions that kept the entire brutal system churning. Imagine yourself, now, as a woman in a coal mining family, perhaps in the Appalachian region of Kentucky or in the coal fields of Pennsylvania, during the height of the Industrial Revolution. Your day begins long before the first rays of dawn touch the mountain peaks, often while your husband or father is still asleep, resting for his brutal shift in the mine. Your life, though not spent directly extracting coal from the seam, a reminder of the pickaxe and shovel from Chapter 2, is nonetheless one of constant, grinding, hard labor, filled with hidden roles that are absolutely vital to the survival of your family and the functioning of the entire company town, a callback to Chapter 6. It's like being the invisible engine of a massive, creaking machine, performing countless tasks that are essential for it to run, but rarely getting the recognition for your tireless efforts. While women were generally excluded from direct, underground coal extraction in the United States by the mid-19th century, unlike earlier practices in Europe or certain niche roles, their labor was indispensable to the mining economy. Their work was primarily, but not exclusively, centered around home's hearth. Yet this domestic sphere demanded immense physical and mental fortitude. It wasn't a gentle, idyllic existence. It was a constant battle against dirt, disease, and deprivation. One of the most physically demanding tasks was managing water. In company towns, running water was rare, especially in the early days. Women often walked long distances to a communal well or stream, hauling heavy buckets of water back to their homes for cooking, cleaning, and bathing. Imagine carrying gallons of water, day after day, through muddy, uneven terrain, in all kinds of weather, just to perform basic household chores. It's a workout that would challenge even the most dedicated modern athlete. A common historical truth is that while direct underground mining was predominantly male by the late 19th century in the US, women in coal mining communities performed extensive, unacknowledged physical labor in the domestic sphere, including hauling water, washing coal-blackened clothes, and managing household economies, which were essential for the survival of mining families. This highlights their critical, yet often undervalued, contribution to the industrial workforce. Historians still widely debate the precise economic valuation of women's domestic labor in these company towns, and how much their unpaid work subsidized the low wages paid to male miners, implicitly contributing to the profitability of the coal industry. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about the hard labor and hidden roles of women of the mine is their grueling, often multi-day process of washing the miners' clothes, which were absolutely saturated with abrasive, greasy coal dust, requiring hours of back-breaking scrubbing and boiling, often in freezing outdoor conditions, without modern detergents or washing machines. Imagine the sheer Herculean task. Men's work clothes were not just dirty, they were impregnated with layers of fine, sharp coal dust, mixed with sweat, grime, and sometimes even mud or oil. This coal dust was highly abrasive and notoriously difficult to remove. Women would often have to soak the clothes for hours, then vigorously scrub them by hand on a washboard, sometimes using harsh lye soap, boiling them in large cauldrons over an open fire, and then rinsing them repeatedly, all to get them clean enough for the next shift. This was often done outdoors, regardless of the weather, with chapped, raw hands during freezing winters and sweltering summers. It's like trying to clean a chimney with a toothbrush, repeatedly, every single day, with no running water. Beyond the ceaseless washing, women managed the household budget, often on the razor's edge of poverty, a persistent theme from Chapter 6. They stretched meager wages, bought necessities from the overpriced company store using that infamous scrip, and tried to put food on the table for often large families, including countless children, a poignant reminder of childhood's end from Chapter 5. They were expert managers, making every penny count, patching clothes, foraging for food, and maintaining gardens to supplement their families' diets. Their financial acumen, born of necessity, was a critical factor in whether a family survived or succumbed to hunger. Women also provided essential care for the sick and injured. Given the constant dangers of the mine, accidents, gas explosions, and debilitating lung diseases revisit diseased lungs from Chapter 3, illness and injury were tragically common. Women served as nurses, often without formal training, tending to wounds, nursing fevers, and comforting those who were slowly dying from black lung. They were the first responders, the constant caregivers, and the emotional anchors for families facing immense hardship and frequent tragedy. Moreover, women often held the social fabric of the company town together. They organized informal support networks, shared resources when times were tough, and provided emotional comfort to one another in the face of widespread loss. They were the unacknowledged community leaders, weaving threads of solidarity in a challenging environment. While their contributions were largely confined to the domestic sphere, some women did work in visible roles outside the home, often in company-owned boarding houses, cooking and cleaning for single miners, or running small businesses if allowed. And in moments of extreme labor, unrest, a preview of Chapter 8, women were often at the forefront, marching, protesting, and confronting company guards, demonstrating their fierce resilience, a taste of Voices of Resilience from Chapter 9 and dedication to their families' survival. So, while the stories of coal miners often focus on the men who descended into the earth, it's crucial to recognize the profound contributions of the women of the mine. Their relentless hard labor and hidden roles in maintaining home's hearth were not merely domestic duties. They were essential pillars of the industrial economy, allowing the extraction of coal to continue, even as they endured their own battles against poverty, hardship, and the pervasive dangers of the mining life. This era reminds us of the often unseen sacrifices that fueled progress, proving that for millennia, the strength of communities rested on the tireless, unacknowledged efforts of women who, in their own way, dug as deep for survival as any man. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of women of the mine, your ancient ancestor. If a woman in a coal town would have endured relentless hard labor, performing hidden roles like endlessly washing coal-blackened clothes and managing household budgets with meager scrip, all while nurturing her family at home's hearth amidst constant hardship. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish gender equality and shared burdens today, for centuries, countless women performed essential, invisible labor that sustained entire industries, leaving us truly grateful for the recognition and support of domestic work that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mining communities, let's gently return to that world where the women of the mine performed relentless hard labor and filled hidden roles around home's hearth, silently sustaining communities gripped by poverty and debt's grip. If we've just explored the often unseen resilience that kept families afloat, tonight we'll witness the eruption of collective frustration and the desperate struggle for dignity, fight for fairness, strikes, unions, and bloody battles. You might think of workers' rights as a given, but for your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, these basic protections were forged in the crucible of fierce, often violent, confrontations against powerful companies, a relentless fight for fairness that stained the American landscape with bloody battles. Imagine yourself, now, in the late 19th or early 20th century, standing with a crowd of weary, coal-dusted miners and their families in a company town. Perhaps Latimer, Pennsylvania, or Ludlow, Colorado. The air is thick with tension, not just coal dust, and the usual silence of the company-controlled streets, a callback to Chapter 6, is broken by the murmur of angry voices. For generations, you and your ancestors have endured the brutal life of a coal miner. The suffocating darkness in Chapter 1, the relentless toil, Chapter 2, the diseased lungs, Chapter 3, the constant threat of explosions, Chapter 4, the exploitation of children, Chapter 5, and the insidious control of the company town. Now, something has finally broken. You're ready to fight for fairness, ready to join the growing wave of strikes and form unions, even if it means facing down the formidable power of the coal barons in what could become bloody battles. It's like being a single piece of driftwood in a vast, churning ocean. And suddenly, you feel the collective current of countless other pieces, all moving in the same direction, gathering strength to form a tidal wave. The grievances were numerous and deep-seated. Miners demanded better wages, fairer payment practices, an end to that insidious scrip, safer working conditions, an 8-hour workday, and recognition of their right to organize. They were tired of being treated as disposable cogs in the industrial machine, their lives cheap and easily replaced. They understood that individually. They held no power against the vast resources of the coal companies. Their only hope lay in collective action, in forming unions. The United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, founded in 1890, became a powerful voice for miners across the nation. But forming a union was a dangerous act. Companies fiercely resisted unionization, viewing it as a direct threat to their control and profits. Miners who attempted to organize faced immediate dismissal, eviction from their company homes, and often blacklisting from every mine in the region. Union organizers were met with violence, intimidation, and even murder. Imagine risking not just your job, but your home and your very life, simply for suggesting that workers deserve better treatment. A common historical truth is that coal miners during the Industrial Revolution engaged in widespread, often violent, labor strikes and formed unions like the United Mine Workers of America to fight for improved wages, working conditions, and the right to organize, facing fierce and often deadly resistance from powerful coal companies. These struggles were pivotal in the development of American labor law and workers' rights. Historians still widely debate the precise effectiveness of early federal and state interventions in mitigating labor violence, and whether such interventions truly protected workers' rights or were more often aimed at maintaining industrial production and corporate interests. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about these bloody battles and the desperation of the fight for fairness is the widespread deployment of private armed guards and professional strikebreakers by coal companies, often former military personnel or ruthless mercenaries, who used extreme violence, including mass shootings, against striking miners and their families, with little fear of legal repercussions. These weren't just company police, a callback to Chapter 6. These were heavily armed forces, often brought in from outside the community, with a clear mandate to break the strike by any means necessary. Events like the Latimer Massacre of 1897 in Pennsylvania, where company-hired deputies opened fire on unarmed striking miners, killing 19, or the Ludlow Massacre of 1914 in Colorado, where the state militia and company guards attacked a tent colony of striking miners and their families, killing women and children, illustrate the brutal reality. Imagine peaceful protesters, holding signs and demanding basic rights, being met with hails of bullets from armed guards hired by the very company they work for. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Only the gunfight is against your employer, and they have an army. The strikes were grueling. Miners and their families endured immense hardship, often living in tent colonies or makeshift shelters after being evicted from their company homes. They faced starvation, harsh winters, and the constant threat of violence. The women of the mine revisit. Chapter 7 played a crucial role during these strikes, organizing soup kitchens, marching on picket lines, and often standing defiantly against armed guards. Demonstrating incredible resilience, a glimpse into Chapter 9. Their collective strength became a vital, often overlooked, force in these struggles. These bloody battles often made national headlines, forcing the public to confront the harsh realities of industrial labor. While public sympathy sometimes swayed in favor of the miners, the power of the coal companies, often backed by sympathetic state governments and even federal troops, was immense. The fight was rarely straightforward, marked by periods of apparent victory followed by setbacks, betrayals, and renewed repression. Despite the setbacks and the horrific violence, the fight for fairness slowly, painstakingly gained ground. Each strike, even those that ended in defeat, contributed to the growing awareness of workers' exploitation. The sacrifices made by miners and their families in these bloody battles eventually paved the way for progressive labor legislation, including limitations on child labor, improved safety regulations, and, eventually, the legal right to unionize and collectively bargain. The legacy of these struggles is etched into the very fabric of American labor history. The unions that were forged in these fires became powerful forces for social change, improving the lives of countless workers across various industries. The miners' unwavering courage in the face of overwhelming odds reminds us that the fundamental rights we often take for granted today were won through immense struggle and sacrifice. So, while the image of industrial progress might seem clean and efficient, it's crucial to remember the raw, brutal reality of the fight for fairness. The relentless strikes, the formation of powerful unions, and the horrific bloody battles against armed company forces illustrate the immense human cost of securing basic workers' rights. This era reminds us of the profound sacrifices that fueled social justice, proving that for millennia, the pursuit of dignity and a better life often came at the price of literal combat, with brave men and women standing against overwhelming power, demanding what was rightfully theirs. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of the fight for fairness. Your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, might have joined bitter strikes, helped form unions, and faced bloody battles against armed company guards, risking everything for better wages and safer conditions. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish workers' rights and collective bargaining today, for centuries, countless lives were defined by brutal confrontations, widespread violence, and immense personal sacrifice, leaving us truly grateful for the labor laws and protective unions that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal mines, let's gently return to that intense struggle for fairness, where the formation of unions and the harrowing reality of bloody battles marked the desperate resistance of coal miners against their oppressors. If we've just explored the violent fight for workers' rights, tonight we'll witness the inevitable, slow decline that followed decades of relentless toil and danger fading light. Retirement, ruined health, and lingering scars. You might envision retirement as a time of comfort and leisure. But for your ancient ancestor, a coal miner, it was often a grim transition to a life burdened by chronic pain, debilitating illness, and the stark reality that their body, once a tool of immense strength, was utterly broken, leaving behind a legacy of lingering scars both visible and invisible. Imagine yourself, now, as an older miner, perhaps in the mid-20th century, having finally retired from the unforgiving depths of the mine in a place like McDowell County, West Virginia, or Harlan County, Kentucky. The rhythmic thunk of the pickaxe and the constant rumble of coal cars are no longer part of your daily routine. The pervasive darkness a recall from Chapter 1 is replaced by the soft, often dim, light of your humble home. But this newfound freedom is not one of ease or contentment. Instead, your twilight years are overshadowed by a profound fading light, a slow descent into physical decay, marked by ruined health and the deep, pervasive lingering scars of a life spent in brutal labor. It's like being a magnificent old oak tree, having withstood countless storms and provided endless shade. But now your branches are brittle, your trunk is hollowed out, and you know your time is short. For most coal miners of this era, retirement wasn't a choice. It was an inevitability forced upon them by bodies that could no longer endure the relentless demands of the pit. Few survived to a truly old age, and those who did were often severely incapacitated. The cumulative effects of decades spent in cramped, dangerous conditions. Inhaling noxious dust, revisit Breath of Black from Chapter 3, and facing constant physical strain finally took their irreversible toll. The most prevalent and cruel consequence was the advanced stage of black lung, or pneumoconiosis. Remember diseased lungs from Chapter 3. By the time a miner reached his 50s or 60s, if he lived that long, his lungs were often permanently scarred and hardened by coal dust. Breathing became an agonizing struggle, a constant gasp for air. Simple tasks like walking across a room could leave them breathless and wheezing. A persistent, hacking cough would punctuate their days and nights, often bringing up black phlegm, a visible testament to the coal still embedded deep within their respiratory system. Imagine feeling like you're constantly trying to breathe through a thick, wet blanket, unable to ever get a full, satisfying breath. It's a terrifying and debilitating existence. A common historical truth is that retired coal miners from the Industrial Revolution suffered debilitating, chronic health conditions, primarily severe pneumoconiosis, black lung, which led to widespread respiratory failure, premature death, and a life of constant pain, highlighting the long-term, uncompensated health cost of their labor. This tragic outcome underscores the enduring physical burden placed on these workers. Historians still widely debate the precise economic impact of this widespread chronic illness on mining communities, and whether the lack of adequate health care and disability support for retired miners significantly exacerbated cycles of intergenerational poverty. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about these lingering scars and the reality of ruined health is the pervasive, often untreated, chronic pain that afflicted virtually every retired miner, resulting from years of repetitive strain, musculoskeletal damage, and injuries, turning even simple movements into agonizing ordeals, often forcing reliance on self-medication with alcohol or other substances. Beyond the devastating lung disease, the miner's body was a landscape of perpetual agony. Decades of swinging a heavy pickaxe, a poignant memory from Chapter 2, shoveling tons of coal, working in contorted positions, and enduring countless minor and major injuries left their mark. Chronic back pain, crippled knees, arthritic joints, dislocated shoulders, and nerve damage were almost universal. Every morning, they would wake to a symphony of aches and stiffness, their bodies betraying them. Imagine living with constant, grinding pain in every joint and muscle, with no access to modern pain management or physical therapy, relying only on homemade remedies or, tragically, the numbing temporary escape of alcohol, exacerbating their despair's debt. A callback to Chapter 8. It's like living in a body that feels perpetually bruised and broken, a cruel prison of discomfort from which there is no escape. The lingering scars were not just physical. The constant threat of sudden death from explosions recall Chapter 4. The loss of friends and family in mine disasters, and the sheer psychological toll of living in perpetual danger left deep emotional wounds. Many miners suffered from what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression, often silently, with no understanding or treatment. The camaraderie forged in the dark tunnels, while a source of strength, also meant witnessing profound tragedy, leaving a burden of grief and survivor's guilt. Retirement for these men was rarely a period of rest. Even if they were too ill to work in the mine, their lives were still characterized by struggle. Their meager savings, if any, quickly dwindled, and formal pensions or disability benefits were often non-existent or inadequate. This often meant relying on the continued labor of their family, including their own children, a grim cycle, harking back to childhood's end in Chapter 5, who were now forced into the mines to support their ailing parents. It was a tragic passing of the torch of suffering. The mining communities themselves carried these lingering scars. The landscape was often pockmarked with abandoned mines, slag heaps, and the graves of those who had perished in the pits. Generations lived with the constant reminder of the physical and emotional price paid for coal. The legacy of ruined health stretched across families, as fathers passed down not just their trade, but their illnesses to their sons. So, while the engines of the Industrial Revolution roared with power, fueled by coal, it's vital to remember the quiet, agonizing human cost in the twilight years of the men who extracted it. The fading light of their retirement was often consumed by ruined health and the deep, pervasive lingering scars of a life spent in brutal labor. This era reminds us of the profound, uncompensated sacrifice that built modern industries, proving that, for millennia, the pursuit of progress left behind a legacy of broken bodies and shattered lives, haunting the very communities it created. So, as you slowly drift deeper into the quiet stillness of your night, consider the unsettling reality of fading light. Your ancient ancestor, a retired coal miner, would have faced profound, ruined health from black lung and chronic pain. Their body, a landscape of lingering scars from decades of brutal labor. It's a powerful reminder that while we cherish long, healthy retirements today, for centuries, countless lives were defined by a relentless physical decline, prolonged suffering, and the tragic absence of support, leaving us truly grateful for the medical care and social safety nets that define our lives today. Far from the challenging, unromanticized reality of the Industrial Revolution's coal miners, let's gently return to that somber image of fading light, where a miner's retirement was often a cruel descent into ruined health, leaving behind nothing but lingering scars, both physical and emotional. If we've just confronted the tragic personal toll on those who extracted the coal, tonight we'll conclude our journey by stepping back and reflecting on the profound, enduring impact of their sacrifices echoes in the deep, legacy, lessons, and lasting tribute. You might think of industrial history as something distant and abstract, but for your contemporary self, the struggles and sacrifices of these coal miners reverberate even today, offering crucial lessons and standing as a powerful, lasting tribute to the immense human cost of progress, leaving echoes in the deep of our modern world. Imagine yourself, now, in the present day, perhaps visiting an old, abandoned coal mine site in Appalachia, or walking through a museum exhibit dedicated to the Industrial Revolution. The air no longer carries the acrid scent of coal dust. The sounds of pickaxes and rumbling coal cars have long faded. Yet, if you listen closely, you might still hear echoes in the deep, the faint whispers of lives lived and lost, of immense struggle and unwavering resilience. This historical period, marked by brutal working conditions and profound human sacrifice, left an undeniable legacy that continues to shape our society, offering invaluable lessons about labor, justice, and the true cost of progress. It's like standing on the foundation of an ancient, collapsed building. The structure may be gone, but the ground beneath your feet still bears the weight of its immense history, subtly shaping the landscape around it. The most immediate legacy of the coal miners' brutal lives is found in the very infrastructure and wealth of modern America. The coal they extracted fueled the factories, powered the trains, and heated the homes that built a nation. Without their relentless toil, a constant theme from Chapter 2, the rapid industrialization of the United States would have been impossible. Every skyscraper that reached for the heavens, every railway line that crisscrossed the continent, every new invention that powered the burgeoning economy all rested, quite literally, on the black gold hauled from the earth by these men, women, and children. But their legacy goes far beyond mere economic output. It is etched into the very fabric of American labor rights and social justice. The horrific conditions they endured, the constant dangers remember invisible killers from Chapter 4, and the systemic exploitation recall company towns and debt's grip from Chapter 6 finally forced a collective awakening. Their fight for fairness, a powerful reminder from Chapter 8, marked by strikes and bloody battles, laid the groundwork for many of the labor protections we take for granted today. A common historical truth is that the brutal experiences and collective struggles of coal miners during the Industrial Revolution directly influenced the development of labor laws, union rights, and workplace safety regulations in the United States, leaving a profound and lasting legacy on modern industrial relations and social welfare. This transformation highlights the critical role of worker advocacy in shaping societal progress. Historians still widely debate the precise causal link between specific mining disasters or strikes and the passage of subsequent safety legislation, and whether legislative changes were primarily reactive to tragedy or the culmination of sustained, organized labor pressure. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about this legacy and the lessons learned is the unforeseen, long-term environmental consequences of rampant coal extraction, particularly the persistent problem of acid mine drainage (AMD) and underground mine fires, which continue to pollute waterways and destroy landscapes decades, even centuries, after the mines were abandoned, serving as a grim, lasting tribute to unregulated industrial practices. Imagine rivers and streams running orange and red, devoid of life, due to sulfuric acid leaching from old, forgotten mine shafts. Or consider towns built over abandoned mines, like Centralia, Pennsylvania, where underground coal fires have burned for decades, creating toxic fumes and causing the ground to buckle and collapse. These are the physical lingering scars, a final stark callback to Chapter 9 on the Earth itself. Direct consequences of the era's unchecked extraction. They are a constant reminder that industrial progress, without foresight and regulation, can inflict wounds on the environment that last for generations, long after the human suffering has ended. It's like finding out that the fuel that powered your grandparents' car also left a permanent toxic stain on the very ground where you now grow your food. The lessons learned from the coal miners' lives are multifaceted. We learned the vital importance of workplace safety, the need for proper ventilation, methane detection, and protective equipment. We learned the necessity of strong labor unions and collective bargaining to balance the power between workers and corporations. We learned about the moral imperative to protect vulnerable populations, especially children, a poignant reminder of childhood's end from Chapter 5, from exploitation. And we learned about the profound human cost of unchecked industrialization, reminding us that economic progress should never come at the expense of human dignity or environmental health. This evolving understanding, a final echo of evolving understanding from Chapter 10 in the mental health narrative, now applied to industrial progress as a continuous process. While the coal industry has transformed, and many of the specific dangers of old-school mining have been mitigated, new challenges emerge in other industries. The lessons from the coal mines serve as a timeless warning, urging vigilance, empathy, and continued awareness, a final recall from Chapter 10 on mental health, now applied broadly to ensure that past mistakes are not repeated. The lasting tribute to these coal miners is not just in monuments or historical markers, though those are important. It is in every safety regulation that protects a worker today, in every union contract that ensures fair wages, in every environmental law that strives to protect our planet. It is in the collective memory of their struggles that fuels ongoing efforts for social justice and human dignity. Their sacrifice helped forge a more equitable and safer society, even if they themselves rarely benefited from the changes they initiated. They are the silent giants upon whose weary shoulders much of our modern comfort and prosperity rests. So, as the turbulent currents of the Industrial Revolution's coal mining history gently recede, and the distant echoes of their toil and struggle softly fade into the quiet hum of your room, let your thoughts settle. Allow the intricate details of echoes in the deep, where their legacy continues to provide crucial lessons and stands as a powerful, lasting tribute, to drift softly from your mind. There's no rush, nowhere to be, but here, in this peaceful moment. The grim realities of their lives, from the dark tunnels to the bloody battles, remind us of a raw, untamed past, a profound tapestry of human suffering and extraordinary resilience. Its story is a powerful reminder that progress, while often celebrated, always carries a human cost, and that the foundations of our modern world are built upon the sacrifices of countless individuals whose struggles resonate through time, urging us to remember, to learn, and to always strive for a more just and compassionate future. Just relax, and let sleep softly claim you, knowing that the turbulent waters of the past have calmed, leaving you in the comforting quiet of the present, where the only adventure you need now is the one waiting for you in your dreams.